Well, that ended a little quicker than I was expecting it to, but that is Damsel. They are out of the Vancouver area in British Columbia. They are the latest artist to join Indie Tunes Records. That is, we've got the night. It is coming out this Friday, and it's actually a re-release of the song, and it had already garnered many thousands of streams across various download and stream platforms. We're looking forward to them coming on the label. They've got some tours lined up, and really excited with the stuff that they're going to be doing over the next little while. That is Damsel, and again, they're from British Columbia. I'm just going to check my audio, make sure everything is all good here. Well, tonight we're going to talk about some AI stuff. And AI is wreaking havoc, or has a potential to wreak havoc with the music industry, much the same as these hurricanes. And we're certainly thinking about people that are in the path of Hurricane Milton tonight, and the destruction that is in its pathway is going to be pretty devastating. So really concerned about that, for our friends that are from that area as well. So our thoughts go out to them as well tonight as we think forward about what's going to be happening the next few days there down in Florida, and of course up along the coast, the eastern seaboard, to see what happens there as well. Well, we're going to talk about AI tonight and a whole bunch more, stuff that's right, stuff that's wrong with the music industry, what we can do to change it. But before I do, I want to introduce my co-host with the most from the East Coast, Sean McKenna from the podcast Barstools and Bandtalk. Rimshots with Sean.
Howdy ho.
Hey, brother, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good. Not too bad.
Gonna get rid of this. Yeah. So, I'm going to talk about some stuff that's going on with AI. And there was a post that I saw not long ago. I sent it to my here in Facebook, and I'm actually going to grab it and take a look at. It's a photograph, um, and you posted it, Sean. You posted it. It's a photograph of Freddie Mercury. It's,
Yes.
we're in the golden age of music. There will be a time when technology becomes so advanced that we'll rely on them to make music rather than raw talent. Music will lose its soul. Freddie Mercury.
Yeah. Which coming from him is interesting because they would have been a band in the '70s that would have been using technology to their advantage with how they recorded because they were doing things that other people weren't. So he probably had a little bit of foresight into that taking place, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as they were developing techniques for changing voices, being able to add things in, punch ins, punch outs, those kinds of things. I'm certainly he lived long enough to see those kinds of things. And there's some things, in terms of, this was another thing that I saw as well. So these changes occur as early, or these things in technology occur as early as 1948, when we started seeing some changes in the music industry and how those things were going to affect music going forward. And now with AI actually generating music, there's some thoughts about what's that going to look like.
It was funny because yesterday I was listening with somebody to every so often I'll geek out on isolated tracks, either drum tracks or whatever. I took the isolated bass and drum track of "Wasted Years" by Iron Maiden, which is an iconic song that they recorded back in, I think it was like '85, maybe off of Somewhere in Time album. There's some sloppy shots in that. There's some sloppy fillage, and it all makes it brilliant because it just gels, and it's the human factor. And my line was, today that would be auto-tuned before it would even be released. And it just sounds so incredible. And then went and listened to Highway Star, same thing. Ian Pace had a couple of flubs, and they were just brilliant. Um, what they're doing is they're just numbing. I think they're numbing the audience.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I was prepping for the show, as I always do, I come across different pieces of research that's been done. Here's a bit of research that was done by the University of Plymouth, and they talk about art as representation. Now, this goes back to Plato. Plato developed the idea of art as mimesis, Greek for imitation. For centuries, a work of art was valued by how closely it replicated its subject.
Huh. It's not the way anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
I've seen, I don't know, in the last 2.5, 3 years, I've seen some pretty cool bands play live. There was a band they played on with Megadeth. They were called Bullet for My Valentine, and not a band that I would say would be normally my cup of tea, but they were so stinking proficient live. It was incredible. Come to find out that they were using not necessarily tracks, but they were auto-tuning some stuff. So there were certain little things that were being played on stage that were being fixed in the mix, if you will. And I thought it was cool, but that's kind of where things are now. Everybody wants to hear the record exactly live. And I was telling somebody else the other day, I heard Kiss Alive 2 before I heard any of the albums those songs were on. And I got so live versions of those songs that when I went back and heard them in the studio, I was just like, eh. And you don't get to have that example anymore. Everything's just so proficient and perfect, and there's no soul to it.
Yeah, it's the same as listening to the original tracks for Kiss Alive, the very first Kiss Alive. I mean, there was so many dubs and overdubs done in the studio to that track but whoever did the work on that was so brilliant that they really kept that live feel to the album. That was one of the best albums ever, best live albums of its time ever.
The brilliance of Eddie Kramer.
Yeah, I mean, crazy stuff. But I mean, you look at that and you go, "Wow, that's just absolutely, brilliant work." When you look at that and you go, "How did they do that?"
Well, it's funny. You come to find out that we've talked about this before, and we talked about it with Michael Brandvold, and a lot of those live albums from the day are quote unquote like the moon landing, right? They weren't really live albums; they were studio creations with a little bit of live coloring. I interviewed Rick Browdy, who did Double Gonzo live by Ted Nugent and Intensities in 10 Cities, and Look What the Cat Dragged In by Poison, and on and on and on. And he told me that they took a little bit of the drums and a little bit of the guitar when they did Double Gonzo live, and he said pretty much everything else was done in the studio, including the crowd noise.
Right. Now, here's an interesting thing. You've got Poison that's going to be going out on tour, and Bret Michaels says they are not going to be using a single backing track. They're not going to use any enhancements at all. So what you hear is going to be the real deal, mistakes and all.
Yeah, I'll wait to see, because here's the thing. Bret's solo band and Pete Evick, who's his musical director, I've got to know Pete really well. Bret basically has like whatever he needs to cover the parts he has, and it's in the form of a human being, right? So I think he's got 6 or 7 people on the stage, right? Well, we'll see if 4 people can cover all that stuff. I mean, there's no. I get why he's doing it and saying it, but whatever. It's just to me, it's just an argument that's been done to death. Eddie Trunk.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it all pans out when they go out on tour. And I mean, I've seen Poison in the past, and I like their shows.
They're a band I've come to over the years. I mean, I wouldn't say I was a big fan when they first started, but I've really come to respect them because they kind of started out as very pedestrian players that have become very good players over the course of time. And just what I've got to know about Bret Michaels is he's quite a human being. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just going to be really interesting to see how that happens. And then you've got the whole expose of Ken Tamplin. What do you make of that? What do you make of that, brother? I mean, what do you make of that one?
I'm laughing because I have a bit of an inside scoop on it. um, I've got a lot of people know one of my very, very dear friends who I've never met face to face, but he's become a huge supporter of me, just a good friend. I probably text him almost every day, if not every other day. Lives in the Phoenix area, and he posted something of him singing a certain song, and a profile came up and basically started accusing him of, shall we say, faking it. So through his investigation, he found out that he thinks it was somebody in Ken Tampa's camp. So that whole thing has exploded because I think my friend might have a hand in it. He shall remain nameless, but if you go online and research it, um, I think you'll find out. The simple fact of the matter with any of that stuff, and people can go, oh, shut up, but anybody that's doing that stuff is doing some form of editing. They are.
It's really interesting because did you see the videos done by Phil from Wings of Pegasus?
Yes, I did. Yep.
And I really honestly thought that was a tastefully done expose on that whole, Can Tamplin thing, and all he was doing was just providing his opinion on what he was seeing and
So
hearing.
I've heard through a number of sources that, and this is just what I've heard. So don't anybody go, it's truth. What I've heard is that anybody that kind of makes those observations against Ken is immediately met with my lawyer can beat your lawyer up type verbiage. He's apparently threatened litigation with a few people. That
Yeah,
is just what I've heard.
I don't have an opinion on it either way. I just find that it seemed like all these people on the internet, except Phil, I did not find Phil that way, seemed to just want to jump all over this guy and beat him up for whatever they thought he was, duping the public or whatever. I mean, he's not doing if he was using backing tracks, he wasn't doing anything different than a whole lot of other artists are doing already.
I think it's like anything else. So, like, I people have sent me some things with him, and and you know what? We'll call this a character flaw, a disability, whatever the heck you want to call it. I have a real problem if somebody sends me something and millions of people are watching it, because that to me doesn't. It doesn't tell me that it's real. B, it doesn't tell me that it's good, and I probably am not going to like it because I'm not one of those follow the crowd sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
The thing with him that is interesting though is and again, because I haven't spent a lot of time on him, but a lot of people that I've talked to just don't like him in terms of how he approaches his things, and um, the level of humility, I guess. I don't know, and so I don't know enough about it other than I know my friends involved, and
All I know is I've seen that some of his students have gone on to do some pretty good stuff.
yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
In
I don't
fact,
know.
as far as I understood, one of his previous students was in the running to become the front woman for Vixen before they got their current front runner.
Uh,
So who knows, right?
you know
Who
what?
knows?
There's so much I know about that too that I found out over the last month and a bit that uh, I'll get myself in trouble if I say anything. But here's what I will say. Here's what I will say. Um, if you think this business is full of really nice people, you're probably wrong.
Yeah. The music industry is where the parents eat their young. I mean,
Well, I mean,
rock and roll is a vicious game.
yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? I mean, it's what's somebody willing to do to get what they want? And I mean, it's not my business to judge somebody if they're willing to, go to some great depths that I think are wrong, but that's not my business. Some people are willing to do that, and I mean, it really, I guess you got to look at yourself in the mirror, as easy or cheesy as that sounds, but there's just, you know, Here we go again. I didn't watch it. Dancing with the Stars was on last night. Brett Michaels was on that with Gene Simmons, and they're lighting Gene Simmons up on social media because he apparently was inappropriate. What did you think you were going to get when you, right? Because he got a lot. Gene's a businessman, right? And he's point every time. And I don't know what they thought. I don't know what they thought they were going to get.
He's gonna do what Gene does. I mean, he's gonna try and stay relevant. And if people are talking good, bad, and different about him on social media, that's really what he's after. I mean, he always said there was no such thing as bad press.
Well, and the thing about him, it's like I resigned myself probably 25 years ago, and I've never met the man. I hope to one day, but he's going to be exactly who I think he is. And I'm not going to be disappointed in any way because I've already mentally prepared that he's going to be. And I've talked to a lot of people who've been around him. They all say the same thing. He's very bright. He's very driven. He's very direct. He's very blunt. And he doesn't come across as giving two craps how you feel or what your feelings are. So, I mean, if you know that going in, you shouldn't be surprised when you get exactly that, right? And so I'm just kind of, I'm not, shocked's not the right word, but it's like, Gene Simmons on Dancing with the Stars, and he's going to make fun of a dancer in some way. Really? Like, what I mean?
It's interesting. You know, I've seen other sides of him as well. Like I've seen compassionate sides of him as well. So, aside from him being this hardcore businessman, he's also a family man. He's got a son and a daughter that he raised who have a great deal of respect for him. You don't get that kind of respect without emulating some sort of persona to your children. That's something they can look up to.
Well, and I mean, if you've ever saw a celebrity roast, it's absolutely hilarious because, his son Nick goes up there and basically says, he's talking about, you know, the mom and the dad, and he goes, my mom, if you date Hugh Hefner, you wind up in Playboy. If you date my father, you wind up in a Polaroid in a box in the basement, right? And everybody's like, but I think there's two sides to the guy, right? I think there's a side that's always closing, and I think there's a side that when he's kind of in his house hanging out, he's probably cutting up onions and making making potato salad, and he's just a normal dude. But I don't think anybody should be surprised by what they see because he's. I don't think he. I don't think he's always trying to be relevant. Gene will be relevant forever.
There you go.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's it.
So here's an interesting thing. There's a group that I follow. I don't belong to the group, but I do follow it. It's on Facebook. It's called At the Controls. I don't know if you ever seen it or not. There's a post from September 21st. It just says very quickly, there's a picture of Les Paul here. Les Paul's revolutionary new sound in 1948 forever changed music. Thanks to innovative multi-tracking techniques, he crafted complex recordings using acetate discs, layering guitar parts, and adjusting speeds for unique effects. The game changer came when Bing Crosby gifted him an Ampex reel-to-reel tape recorder, allowing even more sophisticated sound-on-sound recording. So there's early on manipulation of recordings. I mean, it's not something that's new.
Well, it's not. I mean, I think where everybody is really starting to get worked up now is because the one piece that was always there that seems to be, they're trying to remove is the human part of it, right?
Exactly.
Right? And I mean, if you think about, and I tried to find some info on when the first Boston album came out, and we've talked about this before, but if you go and read the story about how that album was created in the 70s, was like they had to be seriously, if they found out how he did that, they would have been horrified because he did it in his basement. He did it with a Rockman, not a lot of amps. Just the techniques that he had for miking the drums, like the way he did it was totally against the grain with how they did albums. Yet it's sonically one of the best sounding albums of forever.
Which was supposed to have been just a demo.
Well, it was supposed to be a demo, right? And a lot of that, and the other thing too that I read, I mean, I don't know if it's accurate, but their original drummer, the record label didn't like, so they got Sid, and he went back and drums to a lot of the tracks, which was unheard back in those days, right?
Exactly. Yep.
But I would have had to been thinking when they found out, oh my God, this is crazy. I can't believe they're doing it. It's sacrilege. What's Tom Schultz do? There would have been the same thing, but it was still, because they would have went in, like most people would have went in and recorded it live off the floor and maybe dub some vocals in or whatever. It's the human element that now people are, and rightly so, rightly so.
Here's an interesting thing. So we talked about art as representation. Here's another one. I want to get your reaction to this. Art as an expression of emotion. During the Romantic movement, artwork developed to express a definite feeling and evoke emotional response from an audience. What do you think about that?
I think I think yes. I mean, okay. I talk about this in musical, and it's taken me a long time to get there because I'm very opinionated. I like what I like. But for you to come to me and say, I love Rush, and I say, you're stupid. Well, no, you like Rush. And that doesn't, because I don't, I like Rush. Don't get me wrong. That's not my point. But my point is, what you like is what you like, and it doesn't matter what I think, and it shouldn't matter what I think. And then you get into these things where people go, "Oh, well, the best band is this." Well, okay, you like them, but there's no, almighty being sitting up in the clouds, basically with a set of criteria saying this is the best band. And there's certain things you can look at and say, okay, well, technique or whatever. I think art's the same thing, right? Because I can see a piece of art and go like, wow, that's amazing. Like I've got a friend that does some amazing photographs and stuff. Every single one that he does, and it's always on just his camera. It's like, this is incredible. I showed it to some, all he's doing is taking a picture of a house. And I wasn't going to argue, right? But
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
beauty in the eye of the beholder.
when you think about art as an expression of emotion, I mean, you oftentimes think of visual art, but that you hear that in the emotion of a song, for example,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And there's something about that song that resonates with you. I mean, name your favorite band and think about something that they've done that got you hooked on them in the first place.
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of different things. I will tell you, and this happened to me the other day. Yes, I'm a drummer. One of my favorite fills of all time is about partway through Stairway to Heaven, where Bonham does this. Love that fill. I hear that song, and it doesn't matter where it is in the song. I wait for the guitar solo because that guitar solo to me is one of the best pieces of music ever written.
Yeah,
And
and you're a drummer and you appreciate that guitar solo.
"Taken on the Run" by REO Speedwagon, one of the best guitar solos ever. And those things move me, and it's like somebody's like, "Well, it's not really technical." I don't care. It's something that moves me, right? "Making Love" by Kiss on the Alive album, just before Love Gun, the guitar solo that he really people go, "Well, Ace is back." Well, I don't care. It just and so it's an emotional thing, but it's different for everybody, and that's I guess the one thing you gotta
Yeah,
get.
yeah, and when you think about that, I mean, here's where I struggle with the whole notion of AI. I mean, AI can only represent what it's being told to represent, not what it actually sees, not what it actually feels, not what it's actually experiencing, because it only can experience whatever you coach it to experience, right?
Yeah.
And AI cannot express emotion. So there's that human factor lost when you think about art as an expression of emotion. Here's another one: art as a form. Uh, Early theorist Immanuel Kant believed art should be judged on its formal qualities rather than its aesthetic beauty. Formal qualities grew in importance when art became more interested in abstraction in the 20th century.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, do you want to see a band like AC/DC with Angus Young running around all over the place and sweating two songs in, or do you want to see a band that sight reads and has music stands on stage? I tell you, you know what I mean. Somebody who I guess is knowledgeable person in the forum basically saying my way is the right way and everybody else listen to me because you're wrong. And I get what they're saying, but again, it's still a personal opinion.
Yeah, and again, when it comes to personal opinion, can AI actually express a personal opinion?
I think it's got to be fed the personal opinion, and then it probably gleans some things to try to make things happen based on the personal opinion. Um, I mean, you see it. It's, and Facebook is an example. If you type in, you get the Meta AI thing, and you type it in, and every now and again it'll pull something up. It's if you put somebody's name in or whatever, it's basing it off Google searches and those types of things, right? And one of the funniest ones was I did an interview with a friend of mine. He goes by the name Sam Spade. He's got a band called the Midland down in the States. He just got from Australia. And so I put Sam Spade in, and it came up with Sam Spade, the detective from, and not the same guy, right? So AI didn't do any favors there. All it did was grab some the internet that was incorrect.
Yeah, it didn't give you the results that you were looking for.
Right.
The last one is it talks about here in this particular article. And again, this is done by the university. This is done by University of Plymouth, and they say art is everywhere. The institutional theory of art that an object can only become art in the context of the institution known as the art world. This is theory created by American philosopher George Dickey argued if a piece is in an art museum or exhibited in a theater, it can be labeled art. What do you think of that?
So if I put this Coke can on there, that's art?
Well, hey, somebody might consider that art. I mean, somebody did the artwork originally for those advertisements, right?
No question. Here's where I fall down on some of this stuff. So you hear it all the time where we've talked to a panel of experts, and it's like oftentimes my experience with the panel of experts, they are experts because they know stuff, but they don't have any expert experiences with the thing that they're being the expert on. So they've studied it, but they've never actually experienced it. So that doesn't make them an expert. That makes them a theorist. That's they're basing their theory on studies and all that stuff, but they're so for example, here in Nova Scotia, I'm sure they're doing it in Ontario, they're putting all kinds of different rules and regulations in for rental property owners in Halifax. Well, I made the comment to somebody that's working to put those regulations in. How many of your folks were actually rental property owners? And the look on the face was, I knew by the look, I hit a nerve because the answer was not many. And so that doesn't make you an expert because you've never done it. And so I would definitely, if that person's an artist and they're saying that, I would take their word over, me that puts a pop can in on a table in a museum. But if they've never done that, then that's your opinion, and that's a theory based upon your opinion.
Here's an interesting thing. Since the beginning of computers, we're talking back in the early 70s here, right?
Yep.
When these computers literally filled rooms. A British-born artist named Harold Cohen wrote a computer program called Aaron to create drawings following a set of rules he had created based on the initial question, what are the minimum conditions under which a set of marks functions as an image?
Okay.
Holy shit. That's the question he posed to this early onset AI program. And out of that came some ideas for abstract art. Now, was it useful?
So, if I understand it correctly, he's putting that in to basically say X amount of arts or X amount of marks equal abstract art. And if the number is below that, then it's not abstract art. Is that what that is getting at?
Well, I mean, he posed a question to it by you putting a set of rules, and the initial question was, what are the minimum conditions under which a set of marks functions as an image? So, what are the minimal number of marks that could be made on a page that would serve to turn that into an image?
But who can answer that? Because again, it comes down to this. This is the problem. I remember in hockey for years and years and years and years and years, right? you would go through tryouts with parents, and what they were looking for the prototypical player that was trying to be picked for every team. And there's no such a thing, because if you look at any sport, the NHL, Sidney Crosby, they list him as 5'11". I doubt he's 5'11", 5'10", 5'9" maybe. But you can't doubt that he's one of the best hockey players who's ever played the game.
True that.
They talk about 6'5", right? But they keep talking about, no, you have A, the will to want to do it, B, you got to think differently, and then you got to have the talent. And so there's no prototypical. So who decides who's the prototypical players? And they go to the GMs, and you get to hear some guy that's got 1,001 reasons on one side why some guy didn't make a team. It's opinion that you hope becomes successful and moves you forward, but it's still, they're just looking for end result rules that I don't think you can say exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that could be used in maybe a good way, but could also be used in a bad way. Certainly, I mean, this is an article that was put out last year by Forbes. And they said artificial intelligence is not a crescendo, it's a paradigm shift. AI possesses the potential to transform the music industry into a dynamic, technologically driven ecosystem, presenting both extraordinary opportunities as well as challenge. Well, that's true.
Right on, but it's written by, or it appeared in a magazine. It's all about how do you make money, right? So, I mean, I understand why they want to push that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I could give example after example, but I'll give you one real quick one out of music, but back into the whole. You remember when the pandemic was happening, they were talking about rent caps and having to have rent caps, and
Yep.
So there's a local reporter here who I actually invited on my podcast because he wanted a rent cap and he knew why, and I said no problem. I'm a former landlord. Those don't work. I would love to debate you. Well, I'm very knowledgeable, and I sent him through about 5 points that were based on my experience, and he never got back to me. And I figured because somebody told me he's Lord. Okay, so what you're doing...
some things defy answers.
A lot of things defy answers. And that's the problem. People want answers, and when they're not there, they go to this expert or that expert trying to get it. And hey, sometimes it's just an open-ended thing. You got to keep moving along and figuring it out, right?
I mean, here's an example. I mean, this is actually a Beatles song that was completed 45 years. After 45 years, it just sat in the vault for 45 years. And with the help of AI, using an old demo tape by John Lennon, they used AI tools to isolate Lennon's voice, to put it on a track.
Yep.
I mean, people may have never heard that song had that technology not come along that allowed them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. But then it's like there's a reason why Jimi Hendrix had more albums released after he died than when he was alive, right? It's like, you know what? Maybe it's fine that all the stuff that he, recorded in a jam space that he didn't put on albums because he didn't want it to be album. Maybe it's fine for that just to not be released. This whole thing, and we've got to get the next one, the next one, the next one. Like, I never heard that Beatles song, but I've got to believe it probably didn't have the same sparkle as some other things that they put out, before I was born. Right?
And you may be right. It may be a body work that was never intended to make it to the light of day. It was really just there for his own edification, maybe.
Well, and I get the the want to have more material released by some of your favorite bands, but I don't know. I've just always found anything that comes out is usually disappointing. That's just my humble 2 cents.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things here that I find troubling where they talk about this in the article. They talk about AI-driven virtual instruments and synthesizers typified by tools by IBM's Watson Beat are catalyzing sonic innovation. I mean, so they're basically saying it's a game changer. It's democratization of music production, giving rise to a new wave of artists with access to cutting-edge tools previously reserved for the elite. Well, I would say that those tools are actually still reserved to the elite, because in order to use all those tools correctly, it's going to cost you some money.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that it does kind of remove is the necessity to have talent. I mean, and that's not to say everybody's and that's what my AI is terrible. But my point is, you really tone deaf, zero pitch, can't play a single instrument that will release songs and albums that will sell in the millions. I could probably name two or three of them now, but I get myself in trouble. Um, so that I think that's where some people have a problem with it, and rightly so, rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, it always makes me a little bit nervous when major record labels jump on board with the latest and greatest new fad. Universal Music Group, the biggest music company in the world, recently partnered with YouTube to launch the Music AI Incubator with three fundamental AI music principles rooted in their commitment to collaborate with the music industry alongside bold and responsible innovation in the space. Well, there's a concern right there because that goes back to the argument that you and I've had before about, who gets to decide.
The people with the money is pretty much who gets to decide.
I mean, is it really is it still the rich elites that get to decide what we're going to hear?
So every so often, some unknown will be discovered and rockets to fame and fortune, and and you'll have to endure them for a period of time, and then things will go sideways, and all of a sudden worlds come crumbling down. I think what I'm talking about, Diddy, right? You see that whole thing right now, and that's just a complete mess,
That
right?
is a big mess unfolding as we speak, and it runs really really deep. We have no idea what's gonna uh, how that's gonna affect things down the road.
Well, I, it I don't know, man. It's you hear about this all the time in sports, right? You take uh, a talented athlete who probably told from a very young they were special, but might have had things happen for them, but again, humble upbringing, and then they get signed to a multi-million-dollar contract. All of a sudden, they've got all their buddies that they grew up with living with them, and things are going sideways, um, and that's not the norm. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but those are some things that you know talk about checks and balances. Why aren't people looking out for those people as opposed to just trying to get more money and make more money off them?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not unusual that people have been exploited, and again, we've had the hockey world show us how people got exploited,
Well, 100%, and
right? And
um,
now we're seeing exploitation in the musical world. We saw exploitation in the religious realms. I mean, there's been a whole bunch of stuff that's come out in recent years that sort of rocked the world, and people go, "Wow, didn't know that was going on."
this is a deeper conversation that is going to get off AI, and I had part of it with somebody the other day, and they're expressing their frustration at reality TV and the whole famous for doing nothing, and I just said, do you know when all this started? And again, I put the asterisk by this because this is purely my own opinion, but this all started the night that the Bronco chase happened, in my opinion, because people put their lives on hold to see what OJ was going to do. And under the OJ Simpson trial, all these characters came out and they all became famous, right? And the next thing you know, we have the Kardashians and it spawned all that. Then there was a copycat thing, and here we are, right? And it all comes down to people, well, two things: people wanting to make money and people thinking that they're not as good as those people. So they'll just invest in those people and help them make more money. And that basically, in a nutshell, is where we're at.
Well, and here's where I worry about this. This is kind of almost like the same as, and I don't want to get into this whole I don't want to get into a political debate about any of it, but the thing is we all know that once certain forces, certain individuals, certain institutions get involved in things, they can turn things quickly to dog shit, right? Um, and here's one of the principles. This is a principle they say they're going to abide by for AI. AI is here, and we will embrace it responsibly together with our music partners. What the hell does that mean? I mean,
Who said that? Was that somebody from?
That's something that's come out of this Universal Music Group thing with YouTube.
So here's my answer to that. Why is it that anytime anybody with any influence doesn't talk to the frontline people and the boots on the ground, they talk to the representative of the frontline people, and what ends up happening there is waters get cloudy, and during the shutdown here in Halifax, I can tell you, I was told by a government department that they regularly meet with the stakeholders that are affected by the shutdowns, and I talked to at least 20 business owners who said they never heard from anybody.
Yep.
So that's complete garbage. That's a buzz phrase to impress people and try to get people to buy into the fact that they think they're doing something, and it's sorry.
And again, I think what they're trying to do is get people to accept it because they're not in it. They're not in it for the public. They're in it for the money, right?
I honestly think, and this is just my opinion, I think 80% of the people that do stuff like that get into it for the right reasons. I really do. I think something has ticked them off and they want to make change. And I think what ends up happening is they just get frustrated when they get in there and figure out that the system isn't designed for change. It's designed for certain people to dictate how things are going to go. And when you can't do anything about that, you have one of two choices. You either quit or you just jump in the boat and go down the stream with the rest of them. And I think that's what ends up happening. And it's frustrating. Elizabeth Miller's back. She says, will Oasis Live 25 tour actually feature live vocals or live playing of instruments? I don't even know if it's going to be live anything because the over-under on that might be 3 shows before it's done. Great question.
I wait to see if it implodes before it starts. Here's another principle number. This is one of their guiding principles. AI is ushering in a new age of creative expression, but it must include appropriate protections and unlock opportunities for music partners who decide to participate. Well, okay, so who gets to decide who are the appropriate protections? Who gets to decide that?
Well, I mean, it's like we know who gets to decide it. It's going to be, our wonderful people in, Parliament or, down in the States and Capitol Hill, the senators and whatever. They're going to put bills forward on our behalf and they get to decide it.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about appropriate protections and unlock opportunities for music partners who decide to participate. Well, who gets to decide who gets to participate? Does everybody get to decide that they want to participate in it? What about those that want to say, look, I don't want to use AI anything to generate my music. I want to keep my music 100% organic, but I want a music system that says that my music is 100% organic, means it was played by me, it was generated by me. We didn't use a whole bunch of tricks to get this music out there, right? We didn't use AI to create it.
Well, I mean, it's like anything. I mean, the problem is the fear of being left behind or the fear feeling you're going to be impacted if you don't participate will, strike panic into a lot of people and it will become a normal thing. AI will become a normal thing. And I mean, I don't want to sound all radical when I say that, but I mean, anybody can go and research and see what happens, right? It to go back into the 60s, Martin Luther King was considered this zealot. People are like, the guy's crazy and whatever, and then he gets shot and dies, and he's brilliant. Well, he was always brilliant. There's no question he was always brilliant. And he was saying some things that people didn't want to hear. And that's what happens, right? And I don't want to get into this big philosophical, lesson on that. But what it comes down to is the fact that when this stuff gets put in play, people feel they're going to be negatively impacted if they do not take part in it. And they take part in it, and then it just keeps going on. It's like next level, next, and it just keeps going, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is something that is somewhat, I guess, fearful about the whole thing because who are the gatekeepers really going to be here? Their principle number 3 is another one that concerns me. It says, we built an industry-leading trust and safety organization and content policies. We will scale those to meet the challenge of AI. Well, again, we're talking about major record labels that always wrote deals with artists that benefited the label, not the artist.
Well, and ever try posting a news article in Canada now? Did you have a say in that decision? I didn't.
No, there's a problem with that as well. Do you know that you can now? This is another thing I don't like about AI. AI is in Facebook. So now, if I want to cut and paste something, or copy and paste something and send it to you as a message in Facebook, it asks me if I want to do I want to cut and paste that?
Yep.
Quit asking me what I want to do. Just let me do it.
But it's my guess is a form of data collection. It's at some point in time somebody's going to cut and paste something, and they said they didn't want to cut and paste, and they're going to go back and say, "Well, you agreed to." I'll guarantee that's what it is.
Right? Something not right. I mean, there's something not right there. I mean, and here is, a major record label saying we built an industry-leading trust and safety organization and content policies. Major record labels' jobs were always to keep the artist indebted so that they were never recouped.
100%.
Right? I mean, that was their main focus and goal. Name me one record label that never tried to keep the artist indebted and kept them unrecouped.
Well, and I mean, there's massive stories about some bands that were huge in the 70s and 80s that almost, went out of business because of that very thing, and were able to somehow, turn it around and figure it out and get recouped and whatever. But then on the other hand, you're seeing these folks selling their catalogs for huge money because they finally were recouped. They don't want to deal with the record labels anymore, right?
It's happening all the time. I mean, I keep reading about different artists, and some I had never even heard of who are selling their catalogs, which surprises me that someone would buy someone's catalog who really is sort of obscure, unless they think at some point in time it's going to be a good investment.
Yeah, I mean, it continues to boggle my mind when I see something that wow, that's this popular. Happens all like Mark Horton, our guitar player, they'll book a show and I'll be like, what? And he goes, people love them. It's like, okay, I don't get it.
It was really interesting. One of the artists on the label and I were having a conversation, an online conversation the other night. We were talking about the band Dirty Honey, right?
Yeah.
Those guys had a Billboard #1 song without even being signed to a label. They're independent.
Yeah, it's not unheard of. I mean, it's happened probably more than you think it has.
And now they're headlining their own shows. I mean, how cool is that?
Well, very cool. Now, I mean, obviously, where does their backing come from? It's got to come from somewhere. I doubt if they're self-financed.
Well, yeah. When you look at some of these artists that have had some levels of success like this, you go back to who you know.
Yeah.
Right. And it turns out that early on, there was some involvement with a management company that also was looking after Miles Kennedy and Slash.
Yeah.
So, again, sometimes it's that chance meeting or someone I mean, the whole idea is that it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know.
Well, more often than not, that's the case. And I mean, I've had some people of late, oh my God, are you going to talk about networking again? Yes, I am, until you start understanding that that's what it's about. And again, if you talk to anybody who's had any measure of success in any business, yes, it comes down to smarts. It comes down to, figuring out how to be capitalized, figures out, different sorts of things. But it comes down to who you're networking with and how you're getting your name out of there. And yeah, it's a broken record with me, but guess what? Until somebody proves me wrong and proves me there's another way, that's what we got to go with.
I think that some of my greatest, what I consider to be some of my greatest successes, have all come as a result of networking.
No question.
And what I might consider to be a success, somebody look at that and go, well, that's not successful. But I mean, I really have grown cold to that whole idea of anybody else judging what I'm doing anymore.
Well, I'll tell you something funny. So we always talk about the whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Right.
Well, 2 weeks ago, who started following Barstools and Bandtalk but his wife?
Oh, really? Oh, nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, he'd be a cool dude to have on the show. I'm sure he'd have some great insights to share.
You know what? I put the feelers out, and but yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. And I mean, it's funny because I was a friend of mine who's a PR person had a post this morning, and it was basically about I don't know why people shoot their mouths off and say negative things about people. Da, 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 da. And so I messaged the person. I said, "Well, who is it?" And they told me it was about this musician in Los Angeles that was talking crap about somebody that they knew. And my friend was just like, "Conversation's over. Want nothing to do with you." This guy thought that because he was thousands of miles away from this person, there's no possible way they would know each other. But the music business is small, and it's smaller than you think you are. And you know, give people a seminar on how to shoot yourself in the foot.
I can't count the number of times I've been on a long motorcycle ride and I run into people. I was up in Tobermory last week on a motorcycle ride and ran into somebody that I used to work with.
Oh yeah, happens all the time.
What are the odds of that happening? You know,
The odds of that are very high.
I guess here it's really high. Elizabeth Miller has a question comment. When you sell your catalog, do you lose all control over what can happen to your music and voice on re-releases? Well, it probably depends a great deal on what rights you sold with that catalog.
And what the deal is.
Yeah, and the devil is always in the detail.
Yeah.
And sometimes none of us, some of that is not public knowledge. Even when Kiss decided to sell their catalog, there's a lot of information in there that is not public knowledge, nor what is going to be intended by the use of that catalog. And does that prohibit Kiss from still performing their songs? I guess not, because Gene Simmons is still performing them.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be some deal for. I mean, why would? There's probably a chance that whoever they sold them to gets a small cut of live performance rights or something. Who knows? I mean, you'll probably never know what that deal is, but they're smart.
Deanbo's got a good comment here about the Iron Maiden tour. He said, "Did I read that Iron Maiden is playing in Toronto?" Yes, you did. They are playing in Toronto.
Yeah.
They posted online saying it's a Scotiabank Center. Yes, it is Scotiabank Arena, and yet our rink in Halifax has the same name.
Yeah, our rink used to be called the Metro Center, and the Scotiabank took it over and sponsored it. Anybody that's a native Haligonian, as we call ourselves, will still refer to it as the Metro Center. The Scotiabank Center sounds weird. Um, and yeah, they are playing in Toronto. And Iron Maiden years ago, 1984, I think it was, they started the Power Slaves tour here with Twisted Sister. Um, but it's just people. It's people. I get it. They want bands to come. It's really tough to come to Halifax because unless you're starting here, it's tough to come here, man. You got to shut down for an entire day to get here. Geography's bad. The city, I won't even bring that up to deal with, but it's tough.
Yeah, there's logistical nightmares involved in those tours, and oftentimes it's not the band that decides where they get to go. It really ends up being a combination of a number of entities that make those decisions, and a lot of that is also based on these days. It's based on market research. Are we going to sell out those arenas?
Oh, no question. And as much as it hurts to hear somebody say this, concerts are not put on so people can have a good time. They're put on for people to make money, and if they're not going to make money, they're not going to happen. Plain and simple.
That's exactly it. I mean, bottom line is, everybody's got to make their do re mi at the end of the day. They've got families, mouths to feed, just like anybody else. So it's a business.
What is, and it's go very interesting on one of your days where you got nothing to do. Go and look up this concert scandal that happened in Halifax here a number of years ago, and it involved government, it involved the city of Halifax, it involved the promoter, it involved all kinds of different things, and it'll give you a very good kind of bird's eye view on how difficult it is to actually stage something here.
Yeah.
And if people, well, I was just going to say, if people would read into that, they might, because I always hear, where are the promoters in Halifax? There's all kinds of promoters in Halifax. They're putting on shows that make money, that are successful. And that's it. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the future? There's all kinds of talk of these global AI concerts where it'll be not the artist performing, but their avatars performing.
Oh, won't that be exciting?
I don't know. I don't know how you get the level of interaction with that at all, and where that whole feeling is going to come from in terms of where does that human factor begin and end with all of that. Um,
Yeah.
let alone the fact that for a musician that spends all of their life learning their craft, learning to play their instrument, and I would say, if you're honest, I'm honest about this. I'm still learning.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why people. I know I definitely can get wound up about that because you see these overnight sensations that there was never any dues paid, and people will say, "Oh, well, whatever." Well, guess what? Part of the learning process is playing a bar 2,000 miles or kilometers from your house, not getting paid and figuring out how you're going to get paid. I mean, that's part of the process, right? Or, going into a new town and getting booed off the stage, or, having a great experience one night and getting fired the next, and you're thousands of kilometers. Like, these are all things that actually lead you to believe whether or not you want to choose this business. And just now being taken away. And I think that's why you're getting coffee, I don't know, just to me, non-genuine stuff that's coming out of music now. That's just my opinion. Don't light me up.
Yeah, and I honestly think that I have some troubles with all of that. Speaking of real things, we're going to be having some real people on the show. October 23rd, returning to the show is Lorraine Lewis. We're going to find out what Lorraine's been up to since she left Dixon. I know that she's been doing a whole lot of networking. You talk about networking as being a big deal.
Yep.
And here's a person who's been sort of living that the last few months of her life. Every time I see her on social media, she's networking with somebody or hanging with somebody different and doing things to get out there and be with people. She's done several different songs with different artists, including Lou Gramm. She did a duet with Keith Dennehy from Angry Hill, who was on our label. And so I expect that you're going to see her doing a lot more collabs, and then maybe who knows what else she's going to do, because and there was a whole rumor that maybe Femme Fatale may make a reappearance.
Don't know.
Well, we might find out that on October 23rd when she comes on the show. We'll see what she has to say. Usually we go in there with an expectation that there'll be certain questions that might not be asked, and yet at the same point in time, she takes off the gloves, man. She's a good person to interview. So if you want to see a great interview, join us with Lorraine Lewis on October 23rd, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, what do you got going on? What do you got cooking out there in the East Coast the next little while?
So I've been doing some work. People may know my producer, Jason McCorson. He produces Rimshots with Sean. And he and his partner, Sean McCarty, actually do a lot of stuff for Rimshots. They have McCarty Music, which is their band. They have McCarty Media, which is their group that they do for everything from video to graphic arts. They released a very cool song called "Defying Gravity," and it's a collab with the one and only Michelle Ryder, and it's doing very well. So I'm kind of helping them with that a little bit. I've got some track stuff that I'm doing. Going to Dolan's Pub in Fredericton this weekend. So I'm looking forward to seeing some folks there. I missed the last one because I was deep into festival season. So yeah, it'll there's always something on the go.
Yeah, we've Green Ink has got one more live show this year. We're playing at an event on for a bunch of motorcyclist enthusiasts on December the 7th. So we'll see how that particular show goes. That's a rare for us to get out of the studio and perform out in public. It'll probably be the last performance we'll do for this year, and then we're looking at doing a few things next year. Not sure exactly what's going to happen with that. We've got all kinds of artists doing all kinds of exciting things on the label. Speaking of Michelle Ryder, she got a new single coming out in the next little while. We haven't picked a release date on that. It's called Crime Pays. It's a great tune. You're not going to want to not stream that song. You're going to want to find it on your favorite streaming service and stream the shit out of it. So next week, I'm not sure what we'll be discussing next week. I'll figure out a topic. We'll get something going for next week. You got some ideas? Shoot them my direction, Sean. This has been the Indie Show. That guy there, that's Sean McKenna from the podcast Barstools Bandtalk. Rimshots with Sean from Halifax.